Welcome to the Dome in Tufnell Park, one of London's most iconic grassroots venues. Over the years, these walls have echoed with the sound of legends in the making, from White Stripes to Mogwai, The Damned and even Coldplay. Tonight, we add a new name to that legacy, Dead Pioneers, playing their first ever London gig right here on this very stage. But they don't just play, lad, they play with purpose. Their blend of punk and industrial hardcore is compelling, but it's their lyrics that leave a mark. Imagine Public Enemy, Gang of Four, Rage Against the Machine, Lamborghini Girls or Idols. Led by Native American artist and activist Greg Dill, this Colorado-based punk outfit delivers a political gut punch that's protest in motion. They're here off the back of their stunning new album, Post America. Dill's words are a direct challenge to colonial narratives, white supremacy and cultural erasure. A polemic force wrapped in distortion and defiance with razor-sharp intensity. So whether you came to discover something new or to be shaken out of your comfort zone, you're in the right place. This is the Dome, this is Dead Pioneers, and I've got a feeling this is going to be very, very special.
All right, Greg.
Sometimes they have to kill us. They have to kill us because they can't break our spirit.
Celebrate white independence, great. All the white folks get a clean slate. Freedom sold as the newest elixir. American white, not an ethnic mixer. A country built on genocide. Wrestle with the facts, don't run and hide. Sets a tone for us countrywide. Blind nationalism, American pride. Fuck you and your little patriot circle. Fuck your capitalist infomercial. Your multi-level marketing at best. Imperialist cult, hand on your breast. Casual fight war while we succumb. Just to make middle-class slums criminalize being broke. Yeah, they chuck it up to being woke. America's so star-spangled awesome. A nice place where the empire blossoms. Killing natives, built on slave labor too. When they bleed red, white, and blue. Bougie politicians with open hands, giant toddlers with demands. Check your notes, what's the result? Your people are in a fascist cult. Fed hopes in the American dream, fed equality and star-spangled themes. We are a nation of death and the gun. We're all merely post-American.
Stupid fucking white man.
For people who don't know the Dead Pioneers, how would you describe them?
Keep it simple. Indigenous fronted punk, post-punk band. Yeah, I think I would just call it that. Spoken word with punk riffs.
Mm-hmm.
But there's some like actual songs in there. So,
yeah. Which brings me on to Post American. You recording that album with a sense of Trump maybe getting a second term?
There was no maybe about it. He was running and it was happening, and the MAGA Republicans were definitely doing a thing, but I don't think any of us really thought that this would have happened again. So we're writing that, understanding the politics of the moment, but not anticipating what actually happened.
It seems to sort of tie in the idea of American white capitalism and its natural extension is violence.
Yeah.
And almost a kind of It almost will collapsing on itself coming out of it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, racism can't exist unless there's a ruling class, and a ruling class only works within capitalism. The same thing with, poor people. You can't have poor people. Poor people only work in a capitalist society, in a capitalist thing. And I recognize that there's different versions of capitalism. The United States is in the absolute worst version of that right now. We have a president who's grifting and saying everything's going to be okay to the working class poor. When our minimum wage isn't going up, like none of those things are happening to match what the economy is doing, and it's no good. So what's going to come out of that? Violence, justification of violence through racism, demonizing freedom of speech, demonizing the right to protest, the right to assemble, and all while upholding the one amendment of, carrying your guns and having your firearms with you at all time. It's a tinderbox, and it's going up.
Is American democracy as tenuous as some people are thinking, or is there a collective left response that's forming, or is it going to be? Are we going to go back to like the 60s where it's actually going to be a street level response to what's going on?
I don't know. The left is growing for sure. Democrats who are supposed to be left are not. They're essentially like left-wing Republicans because as all this is happening, nobody in the Democratic side is doing anything. There's like maybe 2 politicians that are speaking out about it. And there's some question as to whether or not where their allegiances lie as well. In the middle of all this, there's a discussion about Israel, there's a discussion about Gaza. Everybody's compromised. Nothing is working the way that it should. But leftist movements are coming up. There's a lot of questions coming up. I think there's even some, hardcore Trumpers that are actually realizing like, oh, this is not supposed to go this way. This is a problem, and they're shifting their views. But not enough. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I would be surprised if some extreme stuff didn't happen here over the next 3 years.
It's a very brave position. It's almost like you've not prophesized, but you could see it coming through in the film.
I think it's easy to see the writing on the wall. There's something that I haven't heard anybody say, and I just am wondering why nobody has said it. Why was it so easy for Trump to do everything he's been doing? Why was it so easy just to shift all of those things so quickly? It wasn't very long ago that Obama was in office, and there's a lot of problems with that administration too, but there was a lot of hope in there as well. It's really interesting how easily everything has moved and shifted. But so there's a lot of ways it's just easy to see the writing on the wall. There's indigenous activist Russell Means, and he said that the new Indians are Americans. You're going to start to see things happening to Americans that happen to Native people. And it's exactly where we're at right now. Working class folks are under fire. All of our unions are under fire. Everything is under fire right now, and it's scary times. I don't think I'm brave for saying anything. We had a discussion, when we had the new record come out, and when we saw the election results, we actually had a band meeting, and we're just like, no, we just have to keep doing what we're doing. We gotta, in fact, even throw down harder. We need to say the quiet things out loud. We're already starting to write. I have a line that I wrote that nobody wants to grab Trump by the pussy because no one wants to touch J.D. Vance. And just like, fuck these guys.
Thank you guys so much for being here. In the tradition of my people and most indigenous people, we always like to introduce ourselves in our language. So, Hamo, nu Greg Deal, mi na ne, nu Q Yui Takata, nu Kumu, nu Na'a, nu Tabudu, nu Gubutu Yarawara, which is to say, my name is Greg. I'm a member of the Pyramid Lake Paiute tribe. I am a husband and a father, a maker of things, a disruptor of spaces, and we are the Dead Pioneers. This is my indigenous brother, Josh. The rest of these guys are race traders. This is Abe.
It's a combination of Greg's identity politics and then also class politics, and that's something I bring.
And Lee on bass. and Shane, our wizard with 2 wands.
It's what drew me to wanting to work with him in the first place is the things he's talking about and the way he's talking about them. So I think if any of us, weren't fully bought in on that, we wouldn't be where we're at.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all would be able to sniff through if he was not genuine and there was some bullshit going on, and that was part of it. It's like, yo, you have a lived experience that needs to get out there.
Yeah.
And when he's telling me stories about what's happened and stuff like that, and what it's like to be a Native American in the United States, I'm just like, fuck, we need to put more of this out there. We need to amplify this.
This band was oddly born in the space of spoken word and contemporary art, of which I have about a 20-year national career in the United States. So I'm going to share a spoken word to kind of get things started. This is called Dead Presidents. In the nationalistic narrative of the United States of America, deifying presidents, I give no thought to George Washington or Andrew Jackson or Abraham Lincoln. I think of my forebears who fought to stay alive, giving birth to relatives that would go on to carry life and voice, skin, ideas, language and stories, love and compassion, giving place to each of us and allowing me to understand that I am their greatest hopes and dreams never realized. I am manifest.
Are you ever frightened or fearful?
No. I guess I know what's possible. I try to keep my head on straight with everything. I've done protests in Washington, D.C. before, and occasionally something pops up that's a little bit heavy, but no, I think we're all right. Well, I'll just say this: I got more death threats when I was protesting mascots than I am right now, so I suppose that's good.
Spirit animal, you sound obscene. Spirit cannibal, remain unseen. A stolen home on stolen land. A foundation built on sand. He hates me, I like that. Take up your keyboard combat. I shout, you shout back. Big hands give a big old smack. Fight a man with nothing to lose. Fight a man who misconstrues. History known, history unknown, robbing us like we're Lily Gladstone. Christian heathens, Christian demons, take some more. We are at war. Consumption City, we die in committees. Apologize before you say please. Pride cuts you at the knees. Fight a man with nothing to lose. Fight a man who misconstrues. Woo! You know who you are. Folk-ass Indians, culture vultures trying to take our cultural wares, fucking Jamiroquai, some weird, whacked-out settler colonial thievery. What the fuck? Get your own culture. Spirit animal, you're not that slick. Spirit cannibal, you settler prick. A stolen home on stolen land. A foundation built on sand. I'm thinking you just had a breakthrough, but your gain shouldn't be my loss. Your gain shouldn't be my cost. Fight a man with nothing to lose. Fight a man who misconstrues.
One flew over the cuckoo's nest I saw when I was 19, and Juicy Fruit obviously deals with that film in many ways.
Yeah.
What was the inspiration behind that song?
Chief Bramden.
Yeah.
The book's obviously written from his perspective. I don't necessarily agree with, white folks writing about or telling indigenous stories. But, in 1975, when that film came out, it ended up being a really incredible moment because the only real imagery that existed in film was cowboys and Indians. I think spaghetti westerns were starting to make their way at that time, so there was a slight shift in the narrative, but not a lot. But that one was different. It's in a mental institution. You have this guy that fits the stereotype of being stoic, but he's supposed to be, deaf mute. And it's just that one exchange between McMurphy and Bramden where he offers him a piece of gum and Bramden says, "Thank you." And Jack Nicholson's character's like, what is happening? And then offers him another piece of gum and he just says, juicy fruit. Cinematically, this is an incredible moment, right? Because he just said that at that time, the most modern thing a Native person can say, immediately putting him into this modern context because he said juicy fruit, which completely creates a different story than what Americans have known up to that point. And really, he's sort of the hero of the film in a lot of ways, and it's heartbreaking how he becomes that. But just like he's just this monster of a man. Will Sampson should have won an Oscar for that. He is absolutely incredible in that film. Wasn't even nominated, and it speaks to the time, I think, in filmmaking. But it's just this subtle but incredible moment that, was even redone and replayed in The Simpsons, like there's these parodies that exist on it. But in my mind, Will Sampson saying juicy fruit and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest was the beginning of the end for the stereotype. We can start to move into spaces that create more progressive characters of Native people in film.
No one notices, no one sees. His life has no guarantees. Doesn't talk, can't hear, towers over you, stands near, observes and stands, stoic, nervous, has control, loyal service. He disrupts, he constructs, this is all you know. Ratchet is a foe. Thank you, he says, McMurphy swore. Give him more, give him more. Offer small words, whispers a phrase. In the days, juicy fruit, juicy fruit, juicy fruit, you got played. Straight with silence, he stands tall. They call him Chief, he plays basketball. He smiles, he exudes, climbs a fence, escaping madness. No threat here, no need to destroy. His friend, lost out, compassionate solution. On set, there's a threat, mental anguish, mental fall. Thank you, he said, McMurphy swore. Give him more, give him more. Offer small words, whispers a phrase. In the days, juicy fruit, juicy fruit, juicy fruit, you got paid. The life he takes, is out of remorse. He lifts a sink with the strength of a horse. He flees to be indigenous and to be free. He represents you. He represents me. Thank you, he says. McMurphy swore. Give him more. Give him more. Offer small words, his first a phrase. In a daze. In a daze. Juicy fruit. Juicy fruit. Juicy fruit. You got played.
I grew up in Utah, which is a very, very white conservative state. And the spaces that we were in were hardcore spaces. We were all pretty much enamored with hardcore in the late 80s and early 90s, coming off of Gorilla Biscuits and Youth of Today and things of that nature. But those spaces were just white. And so because of the conservative nature of Utah, kids being straight edge, not drinking, not doing drugs, it was sort of part of the culture of where we were. And but it was still white. And so you come in outside of that, not necessarily fitting that white viewpoint. I just didn't really feel like I ever belonged, because there were kids in my school that were in the same scene. They weren't mean to me, but we weren't friends. You know, we would acknowledge each other, but I was not part of their crew. And I always wanted to be, but it just didn't work that way. But I was always so much in love with the music that I just went in spite of that. I had other friends that we would go. But we were always kind of like misfit toys to, you know, like I dressed sort of in that hardcore style. They didn't, but we would go to shows anyways. But the music meant everything to me because it was mine. Like, you know, when you're young and you connect with something, you're like, that belongs to me.
Did you feel like you were on the edge of things then? When you were on the edge of the edge?
Yeah. No, I think that's right. It's confusing times, you know, in the 80s and 90s, because there wasn't really anything that was creating a language to articulate what that is. You know, you know it's different. We have words for it now, you know, microaggressions and things like that. But at the time, somebody would say something to you and I'd be like, oh, this person said this racist thing to me, and people be like dismissive about it because you just don't have the language to explain what it is, what passive aggressive thing just happened. But yeah, we always kind of felt like I was on the edge of the edge. And it was always tough. It's why I never went back to Utah, because I didn't want to raise my kids there.
You know, a lot of times we are beholden as Native people to the perspective of people outside of our communities and not to the reality of our lives. And I question those things, maybe talk a little bit of shit, maybe poke some fun. But at the end of the day, I'm not a very good Indian.
It's very much a lived experience that we're hearing.
Yeah, all those things you hear are true stories. Like they're pulled from experiences. The caucasity, bad Indian, those are all things that happen. But you're right on the self-reflection, because, you know, our communities tend to be also critical, and on top of just general criticism that's coming from the outside. And I'm doing my best to be critical of myself and make sure that what I'm doing is appropriate and makes sense, and it's something that wholeheartedly is mine.
You know, deep emotions, but sometimes conflicting emotions.
Yeah, no, I joke actually, like I don't go to therapy. I'm an artist, you know, and if I can be honest with myself, then I can sort of work through things through a number of different mediums, and finding realizations and self-reflections in places that, you know, a therapist might help me get to.
Have you ever had a personal crisis? You know, when your chin's into the wind and into the face of opposition all the time.
Yeah.
It's a demanding role to take, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I have a safe space,
Yeah.
you know. I've been married for 26 years, got 5 kids, and my house is, you know, set up to be something that I don't have to do all those things. I'm just dad. I'm just, you know, my wife's husband.
But you feel things deeply, individual trauma, collective, generational trauma.
Yeah, it's part of it. I mean, yeah, I just turned 50, and
it's a great age.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I'm probably more cognizant of the trauma that's happened in my life now than I ever have, and things keep rolling out, and it's interesting because I'm having different conversations with my wife about that, and she's doing the same thing in some ways, but yeah, I think, that's the humanity of it, right? I mean, that's just the human experience, I'm doing my best. I find it, especially because we're doing this band and I'm older, but I'm finding that there's a lot of desire for gentleness in there.
Glad that we could go deeper in both emotions, that we could go angrier and deeper on frustrations of what, is not happening or needs to be talked about, and then go to the more sensitive places to talk about those type of things about loss and grief.
Obviously anti-colonial, anti-imperialist, but also very anti-capitalist. And, we get called out for it, but people seem to mistake capitalism for commerce. And also, if you're in a capitalist system, you kind of have to operate within it.
Yeah, sure.
There's no other band I'd want to play in right now. I was actually thinking about how proud I am to be in a band that, stands up for trans rights and just says things that need to be said. And not shy away from wanting to be just an entertainment pleaser,
I'm a huge fan of Idols. Like, I absolutely just adore Idols, and
I love that band.
I can see a little bit of that with Joe. Going from brutalism to Tank is really night and day, but it's all related. I'll be honest, Idols is probably the first band I've been excited about since I was a kid. But they're also the first band that has just brought me to tears. They just are so incredibly emotional while also sounding like something that's not emotional, which is hardcore too. Rollins' band was big. I loved Rollins' band for very much the same reasons. Those songs are actually quite emotional, and you just have to dig for it a little bit. Yeah, I want that. I think that at the crux of good art is emotion, human emotion. I did a performance piece called The Punk Pan-Indian Romantic Comedy. It was sort of a one-man show, a series of vignettes about how I grew up, my relationship with my father. My best friend died when I was 17 at a show, and there's all these different stories about sort of the trauma of how I grew up, but also how I came to sort of know and love the things that I know and love. Part of that was in between the vignettes were these musical segues, and I was just using music that seemed relevant to the storytelling. I was working with an organization called the Blasting Room in Fort Collins. They connected me with two guys, Shane and Josh, a drummer and a guitarist. And fast forward to 2021, October 2021, I was in Florida for an art residency. One of those musicians was Lee Tesh. He's the lead guitarist for Algiers. Lives in Florida, down the street, from where we were.
And Greg sat down next to me at lunch one day, and he's kind of an imposing figure. So I wasn't necessarily avoiding him before, but I wasn't, I just was he was the one person I didn't really know how to break the ice with, know. And he sat down next to me and just was like, hey, tell me about your music.
And he was asking what we were doing. We were talking about collaborations, and I told him that we were trying to create this thing. And the premise of this thing was spoken word with punk riffs or, instead of jazz or ambiance.
He rolled up his sleeves and showing me his Black Flag bars and some other tattoos. And I was like, okay, you understand probably most of the records that I do. I play in this band Algiers, which he knew of.
And I shared with him this piece I wrote the day before in about an hour, and we went into this music studio. There's the campus we were on has a building for everything, so we went into the music studio, set up a shitty drum set.
He'd never been in a band before. He didn't know how to make music. He had some people in Colorado that the music district had kind of paired him with, but he didn't really know how to write a song or any of that, and so. was like, maybe you could read this thing I wrote, or could you help me with this? And so we sat down that next afternoon in the studio at the ACA, and basically he was like, I don't know how to sing, but I want to make a song. And I was like, I just saw you, hold this room, by in the palm of your hands for like an hour. Just do exactly what you just did, but like over the top of this bass line.
Lee had a bass guitar. We had a pedal that I had gotten from home.
And in 45 minutes, we wrote Bad Indian, and we recorded it in that moment.
We kind of ran through it. We did all this in less than 2 hours. So we set everything up, pressed record. We did it. And that was the first iteration of Bad Indian. It was about 6 minutes long.
When Greg sent us Bad Indian and I heard it, I was like, yeah, this is like the prototype for whatever else happens next.
Yeah. And that helped Greg kind of figure out, how does this all work?
Yeah.
Lightning in a bottle, I think. The way it came together was just kind of incredible. I sent it to Shane and Josh, and they were just like, okay, like this is a starting point.
Maybe even a bad Indian. My cheekbones aren't high enough. My last name isn't a sentence. I don't have enough beadwork or turquoise, and I don't speak good pidgin English, certainly not as good as Johnny Depp did in that movie that one time. And I don't care if you connect with Indian spiritualism. I could care less if you did a sweat lodge with your Caucasian spirit guide that saw an Indian in a movie once. And sure, millions of Native people died, but tell me about your feelings. Cry your white tears. I'm just going to be over here being a bad Indian. A woman once asked me my Indian name, and I said, "It's Greg." She was so disappointed, she was like, no, it has to be Red Eagle or Two Rivers or Gray Skull. I said, yes, but is that true? No, I said, without her understanding my brief but generationally relevant He-Man joke, the kind of joke that would tell her that while Indian, I'm also having an American experience too. So I finally said to her, how about Walking Eagle? And she said, yes, but is that true? I said, yeah, it's totally true. But I never had the heart to tell her that the only time an eagle walks is when it's too full of shit to fly, because I'm a bad Indian. Thank you guys so much for being here. London, you are lovely. This is a great way to kick off our tour across Europe. We're hoping to be back in the fall and hope that you'll join us then as well. And this one time, a man walked into my space. He asked me about my things, and I tell him. When he suddenly interrupts me as only a white man can with all the Euro swagger of a man whose people were so sure of their place in the universe, their place in the world, their place in the eyes of God. You speak real good for a Native American, an Indian, a savage, a pagan, a godless heathen, a wagon burner, and I'd be justified in punching him. I'd be justified in cursing him out. I'd be justified in calling him racist. But that would make me a bad Indian, which contradicts that old saying. You know the one, the only good Indian is a dead Indian, but I'm a bad Indian. I'm here. Thank you.